This story is all over the internet. Adam Graham, a rapist of 2 women, during the trial decided to identify as a woman. And guess where he was sent? To a women's prison. Let's dive into it.
I'm 52 years old. In my experience, most men who want to abuse women don't feel the need to change their gender to do it. And abusive men are what we should be focusing on. They are the risk to women, not trans women. If you, under the bill, if you seek to fraudulently try to change your gender, that can send you to prison. So yes, there are safeguards there.
How did we end up in this situation? Scotland decided to pass a new gender bill. In the gender bill, it describes that anyone above 16 can identify as the gender they want, and they do not need any medical or legal procedure in order to achieve it. So anyone can say, today I'm a woman or I'm a man, and no evaluation whatsoever is required. And this is why we are ending up in a situation where someone called Adam Graham decided to change his name in the middle of the trial. And this guy is a rapist. He raped 2 women. And this guy that decided to change his gender was sent to a women's prison. A rapist. Do you understand the craziness of this situation? A rapist is sent to a women's prison because now he decides to identify as a woman. That's just madness. So we've got so many testimonies from previous victims. For example, his ex decided to testify where she stated, "He's very manipulative and everybody falls for it. It is an easy way out. I don't believe a word he says." And that was his ex that spent quite a lot of time with him. So because of the law, he's now allowed to transition during the trial and being sent into a women's prison. That's the craziness of it. In addition, you don't even need to change your genitals. Anyone can declare that they are trans today. I can declare if I want that I'm a woman today. And I can change my paper if I was living in Scotland. That's self-identification. So anyone can decide without any type of surgery to become a man and a woman. And now we are seeing the implications of such craziness into the life of people. Let's continue and hear more of this crazy Prime Minister.
My question is, are all trans women women? You haven't answered that question.
Well, that's not the point that we're dealing with here.
That's the question I'm asking.
Trans women are women, but in the prison context, there is no automatic right for a trans woman.
So there are contexts where a trans woman is not a woman?
No, there is circumstances in which a trans woman will be housed in the male prison estate.
Is there any context in which a woman born as a woman will be housed in the male estate?
Look, we're talking here about trans women.
And I'm now asking about women born as women.
I don't think there are circumstances there, but...
So it's different for trans women?
Well, yes, and I'm not...
So they're not equal?
That is not... There is a risk assessment process done for trans women that takes account of the nature of the crime. Clearly, significant concern arises out of sexual crime and whether it's appropriate for them to be in a female prison or a male prison.
The same Prime Minister that was saying that trans women do not represent any danger to other people is now declaring that a trans woman is not exactly the same as a woman. The same person that was pushing this craziness maybe started to realize that actually it doesn't make any sense. We are pushing some craziness and now we have male rapists in women's prison. Do you understand the lunacy of such situation? So obviously, Nicolas Surgeon, the Prime Minister, can't even develop an argument because it's all nonsensical. You can't even explain it because it doesn't make any sense. If you say that trans women are women, why would you differentiate trans women than biological women? It doesn't make sense. So obviously they are not the same. And this is why they have to be treated differently. She can't even admit it because admitting it will prove that her bill is total nonsense. Self-identification just doesn't work and trans women are not women. Then she goes and talks about risk assessment. Risk assessment is when you are in a prison and you have different women or different men and one person is more dangerous than the other ones. and we are going to assess how to deal with such person. But there's no question about changing prisons. We are not talking about someone that is dangerous as a man that is being sent to a woman's prison. That's not the case. A risk assessment is just how do we deal with someone that is difficult inside the same prison. So she's talking about something that is totally unrelated. When you can't define the word woman, when you think that everything is related to emotions and feelings, you end up in this exact situation where everything doesn't make any sense. It's not based on any biology. It's based purely on emotions. And how are you going to challenge someone that transitions during the trial if you believe that it's all about emotions? You can't assess emotion. You can't assess identity. How can you know that this man is not truthful? Of course you don't. And this is why not everything can be based on emotions and feelings. And we can't always affirm someone's identity just because they feel that they are something, then they are. Doesn't make sense in real life. It makes sense maybe in some type of ideology when it's not applied to the real world. When it is applied to the real world, it doesn't work. And we are reaching the limit of such nonsense. And do you think that the guys that are criminal, murderers, rapists, do you really believe that they will hesitate to manipulate people in order to obtain what they crave? This guy not only raped one person, he raped 2 people. And do you think that this is going to stop him when he will be in the women's prison? Of course not. He's going to continue to do it again and again and again. And women can't fight against him because they are weaker physically. And this is why biological men should not compete against biological women. It's not fair. Let's continue this nonsense.
It is a figure for you. Currently in the UK, there are 230 inmates in the UK that are currently living under a different gender. Of all of those, 97, that's 42%, are in jail for sex crimes. Of those, 44 have been convicted of rape, 14 of child sex offences.
So the people that identify as trans or that do not identify with their gender at birth, more than 40% are sex offenders in prison. This is crazy. These 40% that are sex offenders, you will take them to a women's prison. That will be the candy shop. They will be surrounded by women and they will be able to do whatever they want. Are we realizing that 40+% of people that are identified as trans are sex offenders in prison? That's madness. And these people are going to be able to go to women's prison? This is the craziness of this bill, and that people are pushing for this agenda. People are pushing to have biological men in women's prison. At some point, people have to realize some common sense. This doesn't make any sense. Even if you're progressive, you're conservative, whatever the situation, that should be able to talk to you. If you think about the situation, you have a friend that is in prison, in the women's prison, that's going to be locked up with a biological man. Knowing the numbers of rape that happen in prison, do you think that this is normal? Next step, let's ask someone that supported the bill. Let's see what his reaction is.
What is common sense is that if your crime is that you attacked a woman, then that is the part of this story that matters of why you shouldn't be in a women's prison, not your gender identity.
That's ridiculous. According to this man, it all depends on the crime that you commit. It doesn't depend on your gender identity. Let's translate it in real life. So if a trans woman is rapist against women, what will happen? This trans woman is going to be sent to a male's prison, okay? So if a biological woman is rapist towards women, what is going to happen? Is he suggesting that this biological woman will be sent also to a men's prison? That's nonsense. It doesn't make any sense. So it's not because you've committed a crime, a sex crime, and you're a woman or a trans woman, you're going to be sent to a men's prison. It obviously depends on your gender identity or even on your sex. It has to depend on your sex at birth. If you're a man, biological man, you cannot be in women's prison. If you're a biological woman, you cannot be in a men's prison. As simple as that. This is what has worked throughout the history. This is what has worked in the past 60, 50, 70 years. Why are we changing a system that is not broken? Just for a few votes? Just for virtue signaling? People have to think about common sense and also the benefit of most people. That's how we build a strong society. Let's continue.
You know what, the truth is that if you actually look at this person in question, they have not sought legal recognition, they have not sought healthcare for being trans. No, hang on. So this is not an example of what the bill talks about, because this person hasn't followed any of the
reform bill. Do you still support that bill? Well, I think that is despicable, because you know that means that someone like this Adam Graham can legally go into court and force their victim to call them she and her and by their fake name Isla Bryson. That's what this law does.
But I think that...
According to this gentleman, this Adam Graham never sought any type of legal recognition, and this is why he should not be allowed to go into a women's prison. The conclusion of this argument is that if he seeks legal recognition, then he should be allowed, whether he's a rapist or not, to go into a women's prison. That's mad. So this guy is supporting the fact that a rapist should be allowed to go into a women's prison if he seeks legal recognition. This is the madness of these people that are supporting such crazy bill. Gender identity ideologies. At the end of the day, if you cannot recognize biological differences between men and women, sex differences, then you should not be allowed to make any laws. These sex differences are known for a long time, for more than 30, 40, 50 years. Anyone that has done some research about biology knows that men are much stronger physically. They are much more prone to casual sex. That women are usually seeking protection and provision. When you deny basic biology differences, when you can't even read evolutionary psychology books, you end up in this situation where you're driven by an ideology without knowing any type of facts. And at the end of the day, people are going to manipulate because these laws are very shallow. Let's continue this interesting debate.
Male prisons accommodate vulnerable men in a separate section. Why is the burden of men's mental health always forced on women? We have nothing to do with these vulnerable men. Let them have a special space for vulnerable trans women and vulnerable males, many who are under, at risk in males' prisons as well, and have it in a men's prison environment, just a separate wing. Why can't they do that? No, they have to go after women all the time.
Well, hang on.
Very, very, very true. Why can't they keep biological men inside men's prison and have a separate space for them if they want to? Because at the end of the day, a lot of them are seeking transition just in order to abuse women, to be in women's prison. And when you realize that more than 40% of people that do not identify with their gender at birth are sex offenders in prison, that's very worrying. So now let's move to a different case. Katie Dolatowski, who is a trans woman or a biological man that is a pedophile. He attacked one girl that was 10 and another one that was 12. And this guy was locked up with men in the men's prison. When he was in the men's prison, he attacked one of the fellow inmates and beat him up quite badly. And guess what they decided to do with him? Send him to a women's prison. This guy that is a 6'5" biological man attacked another inmate in the prison and beat him up quite badly. As a reward, they decided to send him or her to the women's prison. Do you realize the madness of such situation? And this is why we need to fight against this, because at the end of the day, this ideology is about the benefit of one person and the risk of hundreds or thousands of people. And in all societies, we always have to have a risk-benefit assessment of every single laws, every single situation, in order to create the best possible environment for our society and people to live together. When you are only catering for a very minority of people, where they have a lot of extra laws for them, extra rights, when they can do pretty much anything they want, at the risk and the peril of women. Because at the end of the day, it's always going to be the women that are at risk. And this is why it's never an issue when a trans man decides to go to a men's prison. That's never an issue, because the trans man is weaker than the man. But physically, men, biological men, are way stronger. Can you imagine a 6'5" man being in the women's prison? Can you imagine the horror, the terror of the women that are in the same cell or even in the same showers as this guy? And by the way, we have a testimony. Amanda Benson, 41, spent some time with trans women or biological men into the prison. And this is what she said. My whole time in prison on constant high alert. My nerves were frazzled with fear. These incredibly violent men were walking around the communal shower area naked and sometimes clearly aroused. Myself and other women were in cubicles with only a curtain to protect us. I was shaking with fear. In the end, I went to the prison clinic and I had a coil fitted because I believed I could be raped at any time. I didn't want one. I felt forced to do it. There was around 40 prisoners and only 2 of them were trans. Neither appeared to be women. They dressed as men. They didn't wear any makeup. They were not, so far as I know, on any hormone drugs. They sounded like men. One of them was a domestic abuser who was over 6 feet tall and extremely threatening looking. And the other one was serving time for murder. Can you imagine the terror of these women that are in the same communal shower as these biological men? One of them was 6 foot plus. The other one was a murderer. Do you realize this? And this is why, as a society, we should be fighting against this nonsense. And this is why we should be vocal against it. Because if feminists are supporting it, who is going to fight for women's rights? It's going to be people that believe that this is not just, this is not fair. And people and women are suffering. And as soon as they open their mouth, they are thrown upon. They are treated as TERF. Trans, exclusionary, radical feminist. That's crazy. And we have, as a society, a duty to push against this agenda. And the question is, how did we end up in this situation? We ended up in this situation because people stayed quiet. Because the vast majority of people didn't agree with it, but stayed quiet. This is exactly what happened in the Second World War, when people committed genocides. More people were complacent. It's not that people supported it, but they didn't say anything. In the world, if you do not have the courage to speak against such practice, then we are running a very high risk that the society will eventually become more dangerous and more corrupt. We have to understand that most people, especially children that identify as trans, eventually this gender dysphoria disappears with time. By the time they are 18, 90% of the gender dysphoria disappear. And of the people that have gender dysphoria, the vast majority become lesbian and gays. So we are pushing gays and lesbians to become trans when the only thing that they are homosexuals. And gays are not talking about it. Lesbians are not talking about it. Feminists are not talking about it. Unfortunately, these ideologies are more and more common in schools. They are already being propagated by a lot of teachers, a lot of progressive teachers. We have to understand that 90% of the teachers are progressive, and most of them support this type of agenda. So when you're supporting gender identity ideologies, you're going to tell the kids that they can choose their gender. At the end of the day, when you're pushing this gender identity ideology to the conclusion, this is exactly the result that we are getting. Nonsense. We are putting a lot of women at risk just for the sake of the ideology. We are sacrificing women's sports, the freedom of women, just for one ideology. And the worst part is that most of these ideas are being pushed by feminists. This is what happens when you are basing everything on emotions. You're not thinking clearly, logically. And as a society, we cannot affirm the identity of one person while putting at risk hundreds and thousands of other people. We have to think what is fair. And what is fair is not only to support the emotion of people that are transitioning or that are transgender. We have to think about the whole picture. When we are putting biological men in women's sport, we are sacrificing fairness. When we are putting trans women in women's bathroom, we are sacrificing safety. When we are putting trans women into women's prison, we are sacrificing their lives. Now, as a society, we need to stand up and defend women's rights. It's now or never.